Hello and welcome to another session of interviews with citiesabc.com and welcome and hosted by me, Dinis Guarda. I'm here to talk about ideas, people, and especially how we can actually change the world and look at the biggest problems and issues that humanity is facing, and that we can actually think out of the box and look at smaller increased situations, both in technology, ideas, policy making, and as well strategies that can actually be used to implement better directions and better roads for what we've been facing and what we are doing in our daily operations. And this platform, we've been profiling actually global personalities and authors and influencers and CEOs and academics as well. We've been actually right now passing the 70 interviews or close to that. And this is part of citiesabc.com. There is a new wiki for AR, intelligent smart cities and nations, a digital platform for reinventing the way we look at society and the idea of society 5.0, cities, universities, organizations, and all of us as citizens. Today we have with us Muhammad Chbib, that has an excellent profile and is joining us from Germany. It's an international executive level and has an experience as a manager and as a CEO in startups and large corporations, both in Europe and MENA, and since the late 90s. He's been advised leaders in the most prestigious Fortune 500 companies during his tenure in McKinsey and Company in their Middle East and German offices. And he moved to Dubai, where he took over as CEO of Suqar.com, which is his successful exit to Souk.com in 2012 to form today largest commerce company in MENA, and which was acquired by Amazon.com in 2017. From 2015 to 2018, his company has created a strategic online business unit for Saudi-listed travel giant Al Tayyar Group, and leading their two brands, Taja Hawal and Almos Safar, to a total of close of US 1 billion gross sales with 3 years only. He's a very interesting personal background as being a German national and a Syrian descendant based in Middle East in Dubai. So welcome to our podcast. It's an honor to have you here. And I'm looking forward to interview and talk about your excellent career and as well the achievements.
Thanks for having me here, Dinis.
Okay, so I want to start about your career and background. I think being a geopolitical personality, which I think in your case, given the different nationalities you have in your passport, is quite exciting. And I think it's good to demystify as well what you've been achieving platforms, both in Germany, which of course is one of the hearts of the world in terms of technology and as well business and politics, but as well Syria, that is one of the most old empires in history of mankind. And the last decade, unfortunately, has been going through a lot of challenges. And of course, in the Middle East, where you've been actually doing fantastic achievements in your career. So I would like, and as well working at companies like McKinsey. So from your background, overview and education, I would like to hear how you came to be who you are right now.
There's a couple of things that play a very significant role in who you become, right? The most important one is probably your childhood, your parents. This drives actually who you are most, with the biggest influence. And I think I come from a pretty entrepreneurial, free mind background. My father is a journalist of profession, a free journalist, not attached to any direction or any political party or anything. It's just always about saying the right thing, usually at the wrong time or at the right time, the way you want to look at it. So that's one of the things. Always strive to say the right thing and do the right thing. This was one of the biggest influences of my life. The second probably influence was as a kid, at the age of 12, I decided that I wanted to earn my own money. So I stopped taking money from my parents and I started trading bicycles. And I think it worked very well. So I was always the richest kid in school. And I bought my first computer at the age of 12. I assembled it myself. I coded games. I did a lot of things back then that I could afford because of this trading business. So this probably also subconsciously taught me that, you know, being an entrepreneur gives you freedom, gives you flexibility, and allows you to show off certain things. So nurture your ego back then. And then I studied business. So I left home at the age of 19 to study business in a private business school in Germany. And did a couple of semesters abroad So got me a little bit of exposure of living outside of Germany. And I found it quite interesting, especially when you are abroad in an exchange program as an exchange. So you meet so many people. That also influenced, I think, a big thing. And then after I graduated, I started my first online business in the midst of the crisis, of the first internet bubble. It was 2000, roughly 2001. Then September 11 happened. I stayed in the startup space for a while, and then at the age of 30, roughly, I figured that I don't know enough. You know, I was always the superhero wherever I was, but when you sit with yourself and you reflect, you figure out that something doesn't work, right? You plateaued at the end of the day. You plateaued in terms of development, and you want to change that. And that's when I decided that I probably should join an established organization. And in order not to feel bored, in order to have people that are smarter than you, in order to learn stuff, I decided that McKinsey is probably the new home for a while. And then I've done that between 2004 and end of 2010 in the Middle East and Germany. But then the entrepreneurial bug came back, and I was contacted by an investor in Sukkar.com if I wanted to move to the Middle East, to Dubai, and take over Sukkar.com as a new CEO. It was founded by a young entrepreneur back then that needed a partner to co-build the company, and that's what we've done then. And then I stayed in the Middle East to run startups. Now the question is, why the Middle East? Because there are many other places in the world where it's nicer to live. Especially when you say crisis. I mean, the Middle East has been a crisis since probably the early 30s of the last century. So it's not a natural thing if you're born and raised in Germany. I've never lived in the Middle East. I've never actually visited Syria, so I can't tell you a lot about that. It's not a natural move to move there and live there. But at that time, I think I visited a trade show here, Jitex, which you probably know. And I was surprised by the infrastructure that was built, at least in the UAE. And I thought, and that was a driver. First of all, I just wanted to do entrepreneurship, startup. I got excited by it. But then when I was here, I thought that with the amount of energy that I have, with the skills that I bring, with the language, with the history, etc., I would probably add more value here than adding value in Europe. And I decided to stay. And then as you grow gray hair, you figure out that you can give a little bit of your knowledge further to the people surrounding you, the younger entrepreneurs. And that's what excites me and gives me energy.
Oh, it's amazing, and amazing that I never went to Syria. So I think especially having Syria in your CV, I'm sure that it kind of makes some stuff. But of course, having grown up in Germany and being an entrepreneur is as well another contradiction. So you have a lot of contradictions. So I would like to touch that part of growing up in not very entrepreneurial. You have like a lot of layers of entrepreneurship in Germany, but it's like families that are established for like 50, 100 years. I know that the new generation is not so entrepreneurial. I want to touch that a bit, and as well, like you said, the energy that you've been feeling in Middle East. So probably two questions. The first one is the background in Germany, where you studied, and as well, which is of course one of the top economies and as well societies in the world, but as well with its own specificities, to say less, and as well Middle East, which is a completely different scenario, like you said, with a huge energy and actually trying to do things and changing a lot of things, and actually they achieved a lot. So I would like to hear that experience as well, because I think it's quite interesting to make who you are right now.
I think one thing is very, very determining, very defining. I think Germany is one of the most reliable and organized countries post World War II. And it's highly entrepreneurial. You're right about the entrepreneurial dynasties. It's not even families. It's really a big history of entrepreneurship. Um, and I think, and I studied at a university for entrepreneurship. So if you know the Rocket Internet founder, I studied with him. We were classmates. That's the university that is basically the origin of so many entrepreneurs now in the digital space. Probably half of the successful startups worldwide come from my university, at least in the Western world. Um, so that influences you a lot when you're around in this entrepreneur university. We had basically every week we had a one of the big entrepreneurs meeting with us from and the entrepreneurs and CEO. So when you sit with the CEO of Daimler and he talks to you 1 week before it happens about acquiring Chrysler, you get excited. You're like, wow, I'm in the middle of something really big that is happening right now. Then you meet the next day, you meet someone who's the founder of the biggest retail groups in Germany, the original founder. And then you go and you visit Bayer, one of the big chemical giants, and you get a tour through the backgrounds of Bayer from the CEO, and you see how they built the company and the history of the company. This stuff actually helps you a lot, right? In developing the spirit of, I need to create, I need to add value to the world, because all these big entrepreneurs, they wanted to change the world, or they wanted to improve the world, or they wanted to add value to people's lives. And that's something that influences a lot. And when you do it in Germany, you get, and there's a difference, for example, between Germany and the US. The Germans overanalyze and implement in a very structured way, right? In the US, people get money, and there's infinite money that goes into entrepreneurship almost, and they try out things and they fail and they retry again. In Germany, when you fail, for example, when you have one company that goes bankrupt, you're stigmatized. Is this guy failed, right? So this is something that is changing over time now, but back then it was nothing good. When you, in my first company, I had to shut it down after 2 years, 1.5, 2 years, right? And that's something that really resonated with me. Like, I don't feel like I failed. Yeah, maybe it was tough on the people that lost their jobs. It was tough on me on not having income. All of this stuff, yes, it's bad, but at the end of it, I didn't fail. I learned so much. And I think this culture, if you have this thinking, it helps you a lot. And in my early years, I think this really drives a lot of my personality. And then in the Middle East, when you come here, what you see is there's a lot of money in the GCC at least, and it's wasted on so many things that just don't make sense from a sustainability perspective, right? When you get expats and you pay them a fortune of money and they send all the money back home and then they disappear without any knowledge transfer, you've basically taken money out of your richness and giving it away to someone else, but you don't get anything in return, right? And that's something that probably touched upon my Arabic ego. I said, no, I mean, I'm German. And when you ask me, who are you? What I would always say, I'm a German brain with Arabic ego or with Arabic heart, right? So it touches you like, no, I want actually this equity that we bring here and that is here to increase. I don't want it to be drained out by someone that doesn't belong here and doesn't care. There's a lot of people that come here, expats that actually like being here and like to contribute. And that's what I wanted to do. At the end of the day, I think these two worlds of, learning entrepreneurship from the conservative, family-driven entrepreneurial world, taking it to a region with a lot of opportunities, little talent, so that you incrementally or relatively, I have much more probably entrepreneurial digital talent than most of the people here. I felt kind of a duty to stay here and really help the ecosystem build.
That's amazing. And as well, that is interesting because you have experience as well with McKinsey. So it brings you as well to an international consultancy leading.
And that was my
well,
entry. That was my
exactly.
entry point in the region. When I decided that I want to move into the region, I didn't want to move in a place that doesn't give me access to the top-notch people and decision makers. And the best way, I think, to access the decision makers is a firm like McKinsey.
So can you tell us about that experience with McKinsey? Because I think it's still one of the leading companies in terms of research. And as well, like you said, it's a company that makes the bridge between research, business, and governments, which is kind of 3 levels very important for anything we're doing nowadays, especially as we get in a very more complex geopolitics and as well with a lot of technology, because you need to continue researching. And I think you have a strong entrepreneurial background. You start doing things with 12, which is quite amazing. But at the same time, you have a strong research capacity, which you said the German side of ultra analyzing, which I identify myself, but it's not an easy thing. So I would like to look at these levels and especially your experience with McKinsey before we go to your career.
Yeah, so I think the outstanding part about McKinsey is 2, 3 things. The number one thing I would say, it's a very secretive company. So when you're a business or your government and you want to engage someone to help you and to analyze your issues and to be really go in deep, dive deep into the issues that you're facing, you don't want this to go out anywhere. So I learned really confidentiality there, right? So for example, when I worked for a client, my wife didn't even know at that time, didn't know the name of this client to that extent, right? There's something that is super important, especially in the Middle East, with this high competitiveness also between the countries here in the GCC. When you work on something, you have 20 banks in the market, you don't want any content to go out of what you do. So that's one thing. So when you research, when you analyze, when you figure out what the issues are and you develop a strategy, you need to make sure that this stays where it is. This is one thing. The second thing about McKinsey that really astonished me back then is it's a very values-driven company. So no matter what, you are obsessed with the customer success. You want to make sure the customer gets sustainable success from what you are. I think this is super important. So I witnessed situations where they walked out of the room and left money on the table because they felt they could not help the customer, the client, right? So when the client takes decisions against our recommendations or whatever, we feel we don't have the impact that we should have. We used to walk out and leave money on the table, but there was no other way. So money became a secondary aspect. Yes, it's a commercial firm and they want to make money, but at the end of the day, they really believe that if I follow my values, money will. And it's true. History showed that they're now 80 years old almost, and I think they have the highest day raise. They have the most successful business, etc., etc., etc. And another thing that really was astonishing is a very people-centric business. So the HR processes they have, the selection of people, the pushing of people, the development of people, the training of people, all of that was better than anywhere else I've seen in the world. And I've seen so many companies from inside and from outside. The human resource processes were above anything else I've seen. And I think this also had a very, very big impact on me because this drove the learning process that, if you want to be successful in the long run, not in the short run. In the short run, you can be successful by sacrificing these dimensions. But if you want to be long-term successful, you need to look at your customers. And the second thing is you need to have values, and these values, these principles need to be strict. And the third thing is you can't win. And I take football always, forgive me for that, but I take football always as an example for business. When you're on a football team or soccer team with 11 people, you can't win the game on your own, not even Messi or Ronaldo or whatever. You can't. Somehow the ball needs to come from your side to in front of the opponent's goal. And maybe you're the best striker, maybe you're best the defense player, but only the system, if it works together, works. So really the focus on people and making sure that people enjoy what they're doing, and then you'll be collectively successful. I think this is something that was driven there as well.
That's amazing, and I think that shows a lot of philosophy behind the success that you've been having. And I think it's all about the teamwork, but as well as strong strategy and a strong base on values. Because you don't take multi-billion-dollar companies like you've been doing and take it forward without having these strong values. Because it will come back if you don't, if you try to shortcut some things. So can you tell us then the first part, which is quite amazing, when you took over especially the first big achievement? Especially in as you moved from McKinsey to your entrepreneurial part, and you took over as CEO of Sucar.com. That experience, because of course it's quite amazing that in the space of 2 years you made it one of the biggest companies of commerce, and it was acquired by Amazon, which is as well the global powerhouse together with Alibaba. So that experience, and I think especially, I know that especially when you did this 2011, 2012, it was like you said, during the first .com boom, and as well Middle East was going for a lot of Middle East as this kind of plastic advanced, especially Dubai's science fiction city. But in the last 10 years a lot of things happened, and I know that it went up for ups and downs, so and a lot of crises as well. People only see sometimes the shining part, so I would like to hear that experience.
So I think the first thing is I left the consulting firm that I loved actually. So I loved what I'm doing. I loved my job. But then at one point, I was in Germany back then with McKinsey. At one point, my wife got pregnant, and we decided that, you know what, maybe it's time to reduce the travel time. Maybe it's time to do something where I'm focused much more in one location. And then we moved to Dubai, and I took over a company. I think it was 32 people when I took over. I remember correctly, around 30 people. And within 18 months, I grew it to about 150 people, roughly. And we grew the monthly sales from, I think, $200,000 to about $2 million, like that. And then we got acquired by Souk.com. Why did we get acquired by Souk.com? Because it made sense at that time. Souk was a generalist marketplace. And it started adopting. Souk was older, and Souk was working on different business models, from eBay to a listing website, etc. At one point, they decided the right business model for us is a general merchandise marketplace, exactly the model that Amazon was driving. And they were very strong at electronics, So everyone that needed anything in electronics, electronic accessory would go there, but they were very weak in everything else. So they didn't have fashion know-how, for example. And we were very strong in fashion. We were the biggest fashion e-commerce site back then. And we had a very strong IT, and we had a very strong e-commerce business development background in fashion. And I think it made sense that these companies go there. And the funny part is the companies at that time were almost the same size. And then Souk took a couple of years. I stayed there for a couple of months, and then I left after the acquisition because I wanted to start something new. But then the scaling of Souk actually happened 2-3 years later only, when they started really establishing the business properly, investing in the right KPIs. Then they started really hyper scaling, and then Amazon came at one point and acquired them. I think 3 years ago now, almost 4 years. The big learning there, I think this is what I'd like to focus on. So scaling a team from 30 people to 150 people within 1 year roughly, it takes a lot of learning, because when you come from a McKinsey environment, you're used to working with top-notch people. Top-notch, really. Like wherever you are in the world, you have the best of the best of the best. Why? Because the recruitment process has 6 to 7 people filtering that are all equally smart, and they all speak the same language. They all have the right values, the same values. So, and they all test for different things. And then only when all of them say yes, then someone is hired. Then you come to the Middle East, and you don't have a brand name that is as big as McKinsey or Siemens or whatever, right? And you try to hire people, you figure out, okay, I'm not getting really top talents, right? And then you need to decide, do I sacrifice my filter process? Do I really compromise on the quality and work on training people maybe a little more and get lower quality in there in the beginning, hoping that I will improve them? Or what do you do? I think this was a very, very big challenge in day one. And I didn't have a brand name as a CEO back then in the startup world in the MENA region. So people didn't know what they're getting themselves into. But then somehow it worked, and I managed to attract a couple of really good people. They trained a couple of people. If you ask me today, of the 150 people, how many people would I have hired to work with me in McKinsey? I'll probably say 0. If you ask me today in the company that I'm leading right now, and we're now close to 100 people, how many would you have hired to work with you in McKinsey? I would probably say 10. So there is an improvement there, but still you're in the Middle East. So you need to work with talents to develop them much more than what you would do in a right market where you have a different talent pool. I think this is the biggest challenge that you face in the Middle East, but this is the reason why I'm here at the end of the day, because I think this is where I add most value to people's lives.
Yeah, that is really important. I think that is one thing that is very difficult nowadays. I speak for myself. Managing people is increasing more difficult. And I think, like you said, there's a big difference between working in a big established company like McKinsey that has the money and the capacity, but the most of the business worldwide are SMEs and startups. So I think 80% to 90% of the world economy is managed by that, especially in terms of jobs. So I would like to touch that because it's something that I don't think we touch enough. How do you see this, especially your experience with as an entrepreneur and as building something as big as the companies have been doing? What would be the way, let's say, for a startup entrepreneur or for other people that are from university that are listening to us, what would be the kind of the guidelines or actually the suggestions you give to them? Because I think all of us need to learn with the details. And as well, your success is coming from, like you said, the failures and the trial and error that make who you are, and as well the establishment of the groups and the success of the business that you achieved.
I think there's a secret sauce. I think that's fair to say. In terms of learnings, I think there's a couple. If I look back at 2001 or 2000, when I created my first online business, and I hired, I think in my first startup, 45 people. I don't understand from today's perspective how I was able to do that. I was 24, 25. I really don't understand how I ran a business. I think I was totally incapable. But I talked myself out of it and into it, etc. So I think in terms of skill set, the most important skill set you need to have as an entrepreneur probably is sales. You need to be able to sell an idea. You need to be able to sell a vision. When you hire, when you attract investors, when you sell products to your customers, you're the first salesperson of the company, and you need to be outstanding. And I think this is something that a lot of people, especially on the engineering front, they underestimate, right? When you have a very good engineering idea, you create a platform that is world class, you underestimate that it takes a lot of effort, a lot of skill sets to sell, right? And I think this is something that I probably tell any entrepreneurial team that I coach or mentor. You need to have one guy in the founding team or one lady that is a sales machine. I think this is number one. Number two, when I look back and I compare myself today I would say I spend 70 to 80% of my time in hiring people, in growing people, in entertaining people, and being a psychiatrist for people, a therapist for people. It's 70, 80% is about people management, right? 20% of a CEO's work then is strategic. So which means you need to set the ground, you need to set the direction for the company. You need to manage your investors. You need to manage like the high level PR messaging, etc. But at the end of the day, 70% to 80% is about finding talents and keeping talents and growing talents. And I think this is something also that comes over time. 20 years ago, when I did my first startup, I was like, okay, I'm the superhero, I can do it. Today, the first thing I think about is, okay, I need to find a superhero to do it because I'm no superhero, right? I became I moved from a jack of all trades superhero to a superhero at finding talent. And I think this is the biggest learning that I would pass on to people. Focus your time on finding the right talents. I think this is how you do yourself a favor.
Yeah, that's humility that comes as well with the experience and as well the focus.
It's the gray hair.
No, that's what makes the magic about as well loving what you do. So I want to talk about, so your experience, of course, you were part of creating the first e-commerce waves in Middle East, which is still, of course, massive. And like you said, of course, the acquisition and taking something from small to big scale, and as well like having it bought by Amazon is quite impressive. But then after that, you took over again, and you went again, and you did another big thing in terms of traveling industry. So from e-commerce to traveling industry, I would like to understand that because, of course, Middle East reinvent itself as one of the biggest destinations for travel in the world, taking over Europe and probably only competing probably with a bit of Asia, especially Thailand and other countries like that. And we have to give take the hat to that, because you have to see that this is it was a desert. Now is one of the biggest destinations. Even with COVID, is still really attracting talent and a lot of things. So I would like to hear your experience on that, and as well being part of that, both building a multi-billion dollars group on that, but as well that experience from building something that didn't exist, and as well an infrastructure and ecosystem that didn't exist. Because one thing is building that in Europe with all the infrastructure, or the US, and the other thing is to build in a place that didn't exist anything. So that experience is interesting, and of course, kudos to that.
Again, it's part of the learning journey, right? When I came to the Middle East, it was all about creating a startup from scratch, getting investors to give you seed funding, Series A, Series B, Series C, Series D. You figure out very quickly that the Middle East is not really well structured when it comes to startup funding. Second startup, I've done the same way. And then at one point, I said, okay, if you really want to have impact beyond making a little bit of money and hiring 50 or 200 to 200 people, if you really want to have impact, you need to get access to cash, right? And access to cash in a very strategic way. You don't want the quick money from investors that don't understand that it takes 10 years to make a startup in e-commerce really successful, 7 to 10 years to profitability. So usually you get money from someone who doesn't understand here, and they want return within 2 to 3 years. So one of the things that I decided at one point is I want to have impact, and I want to digitally transform the ecosystem here. And I think if I combine these two, what you get to is, if you have a large corporate with a very visionary CEO that wants to transform from an offline business to an online business, but doesn't have the skill set nor the people to do it, but they have the cash, work with these guys and create a startup out of these guys. So, and that's what happened with my travel business. Now, being a consultant, it doesn't matter. You can put me on any industry. I can sell fish if you want me to sell fish, and I can sell travel if you want me to sell travel, and I can sell industry machines if you want me to sell industry machines. So it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, you learn an industry very quickly when you come from a consulting background. The the fact with the travel industry is there was a group that is the largest travel group with I think 99% of their sales coming from offline, and they wanted to move online. So the discussions were very simple. We're like, hey, you need to invest a certain amount of money, which is probably a large three-digit million-dollar amount, and I will create a billion-dollar company for you in terms of sales volume. And I think this is then what I've done, and we scaled the business from zero to about 1,200 people and close to $1 billion actually within 3.5 years. Um, and again, it's all built on the staircase of the career that was there in the past. You choose the right people, you choose the right technology, you make mistakes but learn from them very quickly, and then you grow the business. I think this is the biggest thing that we've done. And then you develop yourself a reputation in the market that this is not the first company that this guy has built, and everyone you talk to wants to work with him again. And then you're approached by people that want to do this again in a different industry, and that's what I'm focusing on. I think creating companies in the MENA region requires much more strategic cash than in Europe, for example, where you have a sophisticated VC and investor structure when it comes to ventures. And that's how we've done it here in the Middle East. So at the moment, I have one investor, which is a Dubai government entity that wanted to start and trade an e-commerce, B2B e-commerce business. And they literally headhunted me to run this business. It was a project they were running internally. And then they decided, look, we don't want this to be a government project. We want it to be a startup, but we need to find the right guy who's able to scale. And then they approached me and we agreed about the how. And that's what I'm building right now. And we started in mid of October, roughly. And today we're close to 90 people. And scaling a business again, which is super exciting to see another baby start walking.
Brilliant, it's impressive. So this is Tradeling. So can you tell us what is Tradeling? And I know that we have limited time right now. So what is Tradeling? How did you come here? Probably my last question, then I have another one.
Look, Tradeling.com is a B2B marketplace. If you want, probably the most known example of that would be Amazon for Business or Alibaba. So Alibaba is China-based and very centered around Chinese manufacturers taking their goods to the world. What we're building here is a trading platform for businesses in the Middle East to import goods into the Middle East and to trade between the Middle Eastern countries. And it's based on different industry verticals that we're onboarding. We started with food and beverage. We added health and wellness, office supplies, and we're adding more industries as we go on, like industry material, like construction material, like machinery, use and new, etc. So it's a B2B e-commerce platform. Think about it as a standard e-commerce platform, but restricted to business users. So you have procurement managers buying on the platform, and you have distributors and manufacturers selling on the platform from all around the world.
Oh, very interesting. And this is actually very necessary, and it touches a lot of things we're doing as well. So one last question. I know that we have limited time. I think we'll probably will have a second interview because I'm really interested to ask more about this. So in terms of your experience, both in Middle East and as well in terms of the bridge between research, then market, creating marketplaces online, multi-billion as well in this case in Middle East, but as well coming from Germany. What would be, especially with everything happening right now with COVID-19 and all the acceleration of digital transformation, AI, blockchain, and all these technologies, how do you see these things playing, especially with the challenge with COVID-19 and the economical challenge that is coming out of this, because we have probably the biggest economic disruption in the last 200 years, but as well, it opens a lot of possibilities. So how do you see these scenarios? And as well, your experience on this, what would be the advice and as well the trends that you see coming out of this?
It's a very tough question to answer because I think there is no right answer. And this is purely my feeling at the moment. I think there has been an overkill of restrictions that harmed economies around the globe. I think this is something that is, from a political perspective, I would have done it different. The second thing that I would say is the amount of money that is now raised and pumped, so raised by loans at the end of the day and by printing money, and that is pumped into the different ecosystems, will harm at least the next 2 generations, if not 3. So what we're building now is a liability for our children and grandchildren. And I think this is absolutely unacceptable. And I think the third thing that you do is, yes, everyone that was skeptical when it comes to digital transformation has now been forced to think about it seriously. I'll give you an example. When we launched our platform in February, I was talking to a food distributor here in the Middle East, one of the biggest. And the guy was like, I will destroy you. You have no chance in the market. I know everyone here for the last 30 years. You have no chance. You don't know anything. And literally the same guy calls me a couple of weeks ago and is like, please, 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 can I list my items on your platform? Right? Obviously, I've been nice. I could have answered in a very funny way, but I was nice. He's a customer at the end of the day. But this mindset shift that would have taken probably 5 to 6 years for certain types of people, this mindset shift came very quickly because they were forced to do it, right? And I think the value of the online commerce, for example, is an increase in efficiency. They will save costs, etc. pp. So there's sustainable advantage. They will not go back to become an offline business ever again. So there is an acceleration in transformation. Yes, I agree with you. I think the educational level of people, however, still is not there, right? Especially here in the but even if I look at Germany, which is a very developed country, when we talk about security, right? I mean, when I look at some of the systems that where I have colleagues working and I look at what they build, and we're talking about really listed companies, it's a disaster. The legacy they have there and the insecurity they have there. And I mean, if you get let's say an ethical hacker to work there for like 2 days, they would probably expose so much data that the company would shut down for a week. That's something that needs to develop much faster. And I don't think on a political level, people have understood this. If I was a decision maker in politics, I would go to primary school and I would start teaching these basics of IT security, right? I would teach the basics of data privacy. I would teach the basics of blockchain. I would teach the basic of the risks behind having something like 5G being deployed around the globe, the risks behind a lot of these new technologies, and teaching kids the value-driven business making, that you need to control your government so that they don't do evil with the technology that becomes widely available. Who tells you that a vaccination doesn't contain stuff that you should not take in? Who tells you that the biochips they will implant will not have something that will negatively affect your life? Who tells you that, these are things that need to be embedded in the thinking of people early on so that they can exercise their control over their governments and over the businesses that run actually the economies and the governments. And I think this is something that has not happened yet. And the only thing that makes me anxious now, and thank God I'm old enough that I will probably not witness this, but my kids will witness it. They will suffer from it. The world will turn into a bad place. I'm pretty sure about that if we don't educate ourselves enough in terms of, ensuring the ethical use of technology.
Well, that brings us to a lot of questions, but I know that your time is limited. I think I completely subscribe what you said, and there's a lot of layers there that I think definitely it's the purpose of this podcast and video is precisely to highlight this and to talk with people like you with your experience and as well insights, so we can actually create a better narrative about that. So I want to thank you because I know that it's been a fantastic, short but incisive, inspiring listening to you. And definitely I want to keep a second part of this.
Keep the line open.
No, definitely. It's in my list. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Dinis. Take care.